Hey, welcome to the second part of testing out this new paper that I have from Breathing Color and, of course, releasing this new print. I'm excited about the possibilities of what's happening here. In this video, we're diving into the details of the print process and getting the testing going, getting everything figured out to make sure that this print is the best that it can be. So let's get right to it. So here I am in Photoshop at the printer, and I've loaded up the Pura Smooth by Breathing Color, and I've gone a little step further, a big step further. I decided to go ahead and do my own color profile for this paper. So using the i1 system, I have the Pro 3 and Pro 3 Plus, and it will go through and scan all of these things that you have to print out on the paper itself. You then make a custom paper profile, which will help ensure you're getting the best color possible out of your machine. Now, the reason I did this was because when I got my first initial prints out, I really liked how black and white photos came out on this paper. But I was noticing there's a little bit going on with the shadows areas that I can totally fix or address, what do you want to call it, finesse, in Photoshop or Lightroom. But I also wanted to see, was this a problem with my machine here, where it's an old machine and possibly it's just gone off the rails a little bit in its color control and its color abilities, and so possibly the manufacturer provided profile was not good for this one. So let's see those differences. Let's see if there is a difference, number one, and then number two, if there is a difference, which profile actually performs better. So when I'm here in Photoshop, I'm just gonna hit Command P. I want to make sure I'm going to the Epson 4900, of course, and then I'm going to do Photoshop Manages Colors. And so this one, BC Pura Smooth, this is the one that they provided. So I've got another one already loaded there. That's me. I have the BB on there for understanding that that is mine. I wanted to name it similarly so I could have them right next to each other in this big long list of all these profiles. So let's go ahead and dive into our print settings and make sure we have these things set properly. US letter sheet, of course, is right. Print setup, manual feed for sure. And then the media setting that this needs is the watercolor paper, radiant white. And then, of course, we're going on matte black ink. So I'm going to get these two prints out. And once they're done, we're going to take a look at them and analyze them. And we'll make an assessment for exactly what to do next. So let's go ahead and get these out. And then I'm going to go, while that is starting to print, I'm going to go ahead and get this one, next one going, where all I do is I'm going to change to my profile. And so I'm going to want to make sure I mark which one. So I got a little pencil here. I'm going to mark which one is which. So as I'm comparing them, I'll be able to keep them straight. So this is the first one with the Breathing Color profile. And the biggest thing I'm thinking about is just this area here, where it just clogs a little bit. It kind of gets filled in a little bit much with the blacks. I know there's more detail in there, and I know I can bring it out. It's just whether or not how it behaves on this paper. So we'll compare it in a moment with my profile. All right, so here's my profile, and let's go ahead and hop on over to the table and get these things figured out. Okay, in looking at the details here, I'm trying not to be necessarily a quote pixel peeper and get sucked into the details of the resolution or anything like that, because this is a fairly high res image. So I don't think there's any problems that I'm going to find in that. The thing that I'm going to find, the thing that I notice, which I'm not sure you're going to be able to see this on the video, the Breathing Color profile is a little different, but it's different in that it's a warmer tone to the image, where my profile is a more neutral tone to the image. And I really liked this paper because of the warm tone that I was picking up in the black and white images, because that tone, that the paper itself is warmer than, say, their Optica One. These are the only two right now that I have to test. And so my profile was taking that into account just a little bit, and I'm getting a more neutral tone coming through, which I think I certainly do appreciate. But when I'm looking at these shadow details, this was my primary concern, these shadow details and what's going on here. with how this is coming out. This is a little bit difficult. In this region here, where I've got the shadow under the boat, if I were to look at just that, it certainly seems like my profile is a little bit more clogged. It's a little bit more coming in with just solid blacks. And I'm getting that from, let's see if I can get a close-up here for you. Here we are with a close-up, and I'm getting that in this little region right in here. I'll use my pencil to point. So basically that little point right in there, and then as we're looking through in some of these other outlying areas, in particular this area feels smaller on my profile than when we come over here to the breathing color profile, and we've got that here coming in. That feels just a little bit bigger, so it has a little more detail coming through. Also, as I look at some of the transitional information or details coming through, these are about identical between the two. So these contrast edges here are about identical. But then when we come into some of these other areas where it's fading off with these waves, this wave action coming through here, mine does feel a little bit more clogged than this one does. And then another thing, way here in the corner of the image, this is the breathing color profile one. This item here, and then these shading areas in here, compared to my image, with my profile I should say, the breathing color profile is just a slight bit brighter in this area here. That's how it's coming through for me. And then also in these areas here, it's a little darker here, and a little bit brighter here. So what does this mean for us then? Well, basically it means I have a little bit of work to do in Photoshop to correct for the shadow areas and to bring this forward so that I get the results that I'm wanting. I get the results that I need. Now the thing that I can do, which is going to be really nice, I'm going to use an adjustment layer, and I'm going to lift some of these shadow areas. But by doing that, I'll be able to then copy that adjustment layer back to my print master, and then that will be going along with every single other size that I might want to make. So ultimately, what you're going to see me do in the computer here to end out this video, I'm going to be making my larger images so that I can then get this on the larger papers. So I'm thinking 24-inch wide paper, some 36-inch wide paper, and 44-inch wide paper. So I can make this a nice big image. But whatever I do, those shadow areas need to be treated the same, whichever size paper I decide to go on. So let's get back in the computer, and I'm going to do a little bit of work now. Just right here, I'm not going to go back in the studio or my office or anything. I'm just going to stay out here right next to the computer, right next to the printer, because it's going to be a pretty quick change. And then we will get a couple more test prints out, and we'll just see what the results are. All right, so I'll bring you back when we have the results, and you can see exactly the curve that I'm going for, or the adjustments, whatever it is that I do. You'll see exactly what those adjustments are and how we're able to then get that translated properly into the paper. All right, so I've got a second print coming out, so I've got two that I tested here. And I decided to go ahead and stick with the profile that I made so I could have a more neutral tone on the image, but still the paper itself is warmer, so I like that idea, but I want the tone of the image to be more neutral. So I've got the first one out on what I call Pura Smooth 1. Let's look at those details. So when I bring that up, I just did a curves adjustment. The biggest reason I did a curves adjustment was I wanted to have something that I could translate easily to any of the other paper sizes that I want to print to, and a curves adjustment will do that. If this doesn't get the job done, I will then need to go back to my original print master, and I'm going to have to brighten those tones using a light shaping layer. That will allow me to custom target these regions and leave all the other regions alone, since it is just these dark shadow areas that I need to adjust. You'd think that might be preferable. You know, and as I look at the image on screen, there's a lot of solid stuff in there. So, you know, what I'm looking for is just a little more detail. I'm not looking for a lot of detail. I'm looking for just a little more detail. So I'll mark this one, and that's Pura Smooth 2. So let's compare these now, the 1 and 2. So on the 1, basically this, that piece there, an input of 0, which is pure black, an output of 3. So I lifted that 3 luminance values. And then on this one, an input of 13, an output of 24. So I've lifted that part a significant number. When we go back and take a look at Pura Smooth 2, this one I left at 0, 0, so we can have that solid black. But now on this one, we went to 18 instead of 13. So as far as the input, brought it down 5 values, so it's not lifting it up as far. And so it's still lifting up the shadows though. So let's head back over to the table and let's compare everything we got now when we're looking at these adjustments, and we'll see if we need to dive even a little bit further. All right, so I'm looking at my profile without any changes. My profile with the first set of changes, that's where I had a 0 point input, 3 luminous values lifted up. So there's no absolute solid black here. And then this one is the number 2, where I allowed it to go back to a solid black, but then just a little bit of lift up on those shadow areas. So let's compare the original with my second attempt here, where it's not as robust of a change. And then I could even bring it down to the original, their profile, the manufacturer provided profile, and maybe compare mine to it as it relates to tonal values. Of course, we know the color shift is there, but I'm wanting to think about the tonal values and am I closer to what they had there? And absolutely, my number 2 change is spot on with what the tonal values are coming in on the original manufacturer profile. So leaving those solid blacks to go solid black, but lifting it up, 18 input, 24 output, and then those other control handles you saw, those were just to make sure it doesn't continue going crazy. So that is absolutely spot on. And then of course I have the more neutral tones with mine. So my Pura Smooth number 2 matches the tonal values as it relates to the luminance values of the breathing color provided. But is the other one a little bit better? Let's take a look here. One of the things I really appreciated about this paper was its ability to maintain, to hold a really awesome solid black. A lot of times when I look at a fine art paper, a rag paper, if it's able to hold a really solid black, then it usually has some other sheen to it, some other texture, some other something going on that it just makes me not choose that paper. And I chose this paper because it's a cotton rag and it can hold an absolute solid black. It's just, as we get to those details down there, it starts to fall apart, which I should say, I'm not surprised really to see that happen, because there's been plenty of other papers that I've tried that are really smooth and a matte surface. When you get to those shadow details, it becomes a challenge to really hold those and get those from what you see on screen to what you receive on paper. You really got to pay attention to those details. So what I think I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to split the difference. I'm going to go back to my 0, 0 as it relates to what's happening with the pure black. I really do like those pure blacks. But I'm going to go back to that 13 input and a 24 output. And what that's going to do is bring up those values a little more strongly. So I'm going to effectively split the difference from what I have showing here. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be where I'm going to hold it. So I'm going to go get that, and then we'll have our final prints coming out, and that should be it as far as getting our tones right, getting everything right, and then finally this is going to be ready for the website, ready to put on the website and say, look, here is a fine art print ready for your office, ready for your home, and it's going to be something I can super duper, if I can say that, stand behind. That's what I really want to do, is be able to stand behind everything I put out. I'm creating myself, everything I put out. I'm really paying attention to these details. I'm not rushing anything. And I'm really making sure that the quality that gets out there, the image that gets out there, is the image that I want to have portrayed as having my thumbprint on it, my work. And you can then rest assured as a collector of my work that this level of detail has gone into each and every print. All right, let's see what that looks like. So I'll be right back after I get that print out. Well, I can't leave well enough alone, so I actually went a half a step further. On the Smooth One, that was the one that I liked the most. Or was it? Now I'm getting confused. Anyway, the one that had a 0 adjustment. I guess that was actually Smooth 2. The Smooth 1 lifted up everything. So the Smooth 2 had the 0 adjustment at the very bottom. So on this one, it was then 18 input, 24 output, and then the next thing up was in the 80s. That was my control handle to bring it back to normal. So what I ended up doing was I put it back to 0. I then, instead of 1324, I decided to go to 1124. That brightens it even more. But on that other control handle, where it was in the 80s, I just deleted that one, which allowed this curve to go up even higher in those midtones. And so that caused all this area in here to become really low contrast and just wash out. Didn't like that at all. So I went back and went with a 0. That's for my first point. And the next curve point was at 1124, so 11 input, 24 output, so that lifts it up. And then I put back in another control at 6060. So that tightens the curve from what we originally had here. Doesn't let it affect the midtones anywhere nearly as much, because 60 on a 255 scale is not really, it's still the shadows areas. So that brought in the interest, it brought the contrast back in to this midtones region, which is definitely good. And it did pretty well with the shadow transitions here. So I'm going to run with that, but I've decided that I still like the overall approach on the 13 input, 24 output control point. So that will be my final result, which I should have done to begin with, but I still made that change where I moved it from 80 down to 60, that other item that holds it all into control, so it doesn't spread the results throughout the whole curve. So by pulling that down, I'm able to really control everything that I need to control. So I think that's just where I'm going to be. So I'm going to hop over in the computer really quick. So the final result, what I was talking about here, 0 on this one. This one is going to be 1324. But then I'm going to come in with another one here, and this one's going to be 60. And when I do that, that tames this curve and how much this affects these values up here. It really tones it down. And I had basically done that on this one, but this one was still a little bit higher. This one was still at the 11 for this one here. But you can see I got the 60-60 coming in on this one here. So yeah, I think this is going to be fine. This is going to work out a-okay. So we're not going to do this one. We're going to do this one. And certainly on screen, this is much better. The tonal values, the way that those blacks come in, much, much better. But the way it behaves on paper, this is more what I need. Because when this happens, when I have this coming through, I'm getting the tones on the real tones on paper are exactly what I need, and it's just going to look perfect. All right, so now what we need to do is go back to our, here we are in Croatia Seascape. We're going to go back to our original print master. And all I need to do now to make sure this happens for every single print is just drag this over here, and now this will happen for every single print. So when I resize it, do whatever, it's going to be great. All right, close that down. I'm not going to worry about getting another print out because I've got enough for what I need. I really have dialed it in. And as it relates to the sharpening aspect, we went through a whole big deal with sharpening as well. Really, the only thing that can really be affected by the sharpening is going to be that rope leading into the water and a few other minor details. That's coming in really fine. I'm not bothered by it. A motion image like this, I don't really get bent out of shape over sharpening. If it's a really finely detailed image, then I certainly get bent out of shape over it and I really dive into it and dive deep with it. But I've got a really good sense of where this image is going now. So we're going to pick it up here to finish this video off, showing you the process to make it for print, to get that available for print and how I manage those files with the varying sizes. And then we're going to have another video here shortly where I'm going to be testing the varnishes. So we've got the matte and a semi-gloss varnish that I want to try out. I suspect the matte will be what I want to do, but we'll see how that affects the tonal values, the richness of it. I have never done a traditional varnish like this. I've done other coatings where you brush it on and things like that. But as far as an actual archival varnish, this is going to be totally new for me. And so I'm going to make this a whole nother video, and looking forward to this whole notion of what the varnish can do for us, because I expect it to even bring it more to life, but I'm trying to hold myself there so I don't get too far in my expectations. All right, so we'll pick it up in the computer where we're going to finish off sizing and getting this on the website.